Thank you for the introduction. My name is Ernest. I'm a student here at the university. I'm in my third year. I'm doing a Bachelor of Arts in Politics and Pacific Languages. And I am very excited to be talking about this. For those of you who attended the Learning and Teaching Forum last semester in about October, you would have seen that I also gave a presentation on the same thing. So if you didn't attend that, lucky you, because I'm giving a very similar presentation today. And for those of you who did attend, I must apologize. Sorry, Matthew. I'm seeing other familiar faces in the room as well, because it will take a very similar structure. However, for your advantage, I have added new photos, so hopefully it's not too much of a snooze fest. I feel like at the outset there are some things I need to mention just to preface everything that I'm about to say. The first thing is, unlike Aidan, I don't have a background in software, so as you can probably tell by the subject choices that I've chosen to undertake at university, so I don't have the technical experience to really provide you with a proper technical analysis. What I can give you is more of what I like to think of as a qualitative experience presentation. And the second thing is, although I do study politics, I don't think I would make a particularly good politician, not least because of my unruly hair and very poor sense of dress, but because when I say things, they tend to be a little bit more crass, so please bear with me. So before we start, I think it's really important to kind of unpack what OERs mean to us, and I think what my definition of OERs will be what kind of begins the presentation that I'm about to that I will present. So the definition that I've completely stolen from Dr. Wayne McIntosh, who presented last semester, and this is just in summary. So basically, it's publicly accessible materials and resources for any user to use, remix, improve, and redistribute under some licenses. No, I didn't think that I was creating the Christmas edition and added green and red just for the sake of it. I've put them in for a reason, and the reason is quite simple. I think the green things are the things that I am very certain and very positive about. The red things, I don't like to use negative, but are the things that I would be slightly more cautious about. And I would advise to look at with perhaps more with precaution. And again, I don't like saying precaution because that's usually what my mother says before she tells me something that she knows is right, but she doesn't want to overstep. So I'll just say, look carefully. The way this presentation will go is, again, I'm sorry, very similar to last semester's. It'll be looking at 3 Ps of what OERs means for us as students. The first one is pragmatic, so how practical OERs are for us as students. The second one is the idea of being a propellant. And that's simple. It's propelling us as students, but also faculty as well, to ask questions about the things that we learn and the things that we teach. And the third one is possibility. And the possibility here is that it presents us with the opportunity to have a Pacific-driven narrative. And it's really important to realize that there's a difference between a Pacific narrative and a Pacific-driven narrative. A Pacific narrative can be anything written by anybody who maybe has never even come to the Pacific about the Pacific. A Pacific-driven narrative is one that is driven by us here in the Pacific about us. It's essentially telling our own stories. So for anyone who has attended university, who has had the privilege of being a student, I think some of these images might resonate a little too well with you. The reality of when you are a student is, unfortunately, this magical thing happens. And I remember when I was in high school, I thought, well, I know how to save money. I tend to spend on only the things that I need. But then I came here and realized that money just kind of disappears. It's this magical phenomenon. I don't know how you can explain it. What's worse is if you're a full-time student and you don't have a job, the money just doesn't even come in, but it's still going. And so, thank you for laughing. that increases your brokenness. There's a really great song that's come out recently that I think describes us uni students quite well. It's called Young, Dumb, and Broke. Obviously, only two of those apply to us. We're young and broke because we have a great education and we aren't dumb. But when you're looking at things like the cost of a textbook, that's something that is, in reality and in practice, it's not a great thing for students. It's funny to joke about it, but actually it's real. Like, for example, when I first came to USP in 2016, one course of my 4-course load for that one semester had a book that cost about $300 new. I was fortunate to buy it secondhand. They have like little Facebook pages where you can buy stuff. You know it's a problem when Facebook starts addressing it. And it was $150 for a secondhand textbook, which is great. That's a 50% discount, but it's still a lot of money. And if you think about, I have another 2 years to go, so that's 6 semesters with 4 courses in each, and if each of them requires a $100 textbook, I'm not great at math, but that's a lot of money. And for those students who, one, can't afford the textbook, it becomes a problem that affects their learning. And that's not what you want from an institution that is a promoter of learning. So you can do that. You can go the route of buying a secondhand textbook for considerably cheaper, or you can do as Aidan suggested, which I'd hoped that no teachers knew we did, was just go online, Google the title of your book, PDF, find the pirated copy, share it with your friends. Because that's essentially what we've been doing to survive, because not only is there a problem of textbooks being expensive, but there is also the issue of textbooks aren't always there, and if you have a class with upwards of 300 students, and that is constantly being rolled out, unless the same is happening with the books in the bookshop, it's not always going to be the case that you go to the bookshop and say, hey, I'd like this book, but then they have it. You know, that's not always the case. But I would like to say that I don't want this to be a presentation that becomes about bashing traditional forms of education, because they have their merit. Textbooks can be really good resources so long as you have them in tandem with something else. So this brings me to the next part of the presentation, and that's the idea of OERs being a propellant for us as students, but also for faculty and staff. Textbooks, here I go again, bashing the textbook, but textbooks have an issue with them, not only with cost and availability, but there's this thing where when I open a textbook that has like penguin, it's got penguin on the bottom, and it talks about all the different people that have gone into the contribution to it being created, I immediately think, ooh, now that's the gospel truth. Everything in that textbook is going to be absolutely right. There are two problems with that. One, truth is subjective. So what my truth is may be very different from what Matthew's or Elizabeth's truth is, particularly with a subject like politics or with language or with virtually anything that you study in depth. When I was in high school, I did math, as everyone does, and so it's easier to tell if something is wrong in the context of a high school maths class, because you can just check a calculator, or you can look at the answer sheets, which they don't encourage, by the way. And you can see if the answer's wrong. Whereas if you're dealing with something like an ideology or a belief system or the way in which people think or cultures, these things aren't so clear-cut. There isn't a yes and a no. There's a very large gray area, and how that is kind of demonstrated in textbooks is not always clear. So you need to have other resources available to you, so that you can then be able to say, well, this person is saying this, and this person is saying this, and then you can form your own opinion. And I think that's far more important than giving a whole bunch of facts to students to learn and then reproduce in an exam. I think if you give students the ability to read and engage with learning materials, it makes us more, one, engaging as students, so you'll probably get more questions in a lecture, but also it means that we aren't just kind of learning to photocopy, because we have technology that photocopies. We want students who can create as opposed to replicate. if that makes any sense. So moving on to the third one. And this is the idea of having the opportunity to create a Pacific-driven narrative, or having a Pacific perspective that's a lot of P's. Having a Pacific perspective that's available for us in the Pacific, but also for people who aren't in the Pacific. I'm so tired of opening a textbook that talks about the Pacific, and it's actually written by some old white man sitting in London who's never actually been to the Pacific. How are you supposed to, one, create anything that's authentic and real, but how are we supposed to learn about ourselves from somebody who doesn't know us? For me, that makes no sense. However, it's not all doom and gloom. There are lots of Pacific scholars who are, some in this room, some outside teaching classes, and some who are yet to discover that they are these people. And that number is growing. And, so people like Teresia Tewa, Epeli Hawafa, these 5 sitting over here, they represent that change. And so I think because I do a subject that isn't so navigated in the Pacific, it means that I have the privilege of being able to see and engage with readings that aren't just stuff that's been, downloaded from someone else. It's stuff that has been tailor-made for the learning experience that I am here to get. And for me, that's something that is really, really important. Moving on to my second to last slide. What does all my babbling about this experience actually mean? And it means a few things. And I think it's really important to reflect on this question, because whether or not you're a student, you're a teacher, you're a member of any other staff, or you created open educational resources, that's something that you need to ask. What does actually what we've done over the course of the last 10 minutes or 10 years actually mean in practice? And there are a few things. The first thing that I would like to address is, like with any new initiative or any new implementation into any sort of institution, there are going to be problems. And I think it's great that we stand here and we talk about how great OERs are, because I'm a firm believer that they really do have merit. But I think it's also equally as important to kind of be critical and look for what could be the possible flaws. Even if we don't see any at the moment, there needs to be some sort of prediction or trying to foresee what could possibly happen, because everything has their mistakes. Regardless of how much you believe in someone or something, it has a mistake. There's a flaw, there are issues, and these issues, if left in ignorance, can fester and become worse than they really than they could have been. So take, for example, the idea of lecture capture. When I came in 2016, that was when lecture capture was very, very new. So I used to see tech staff every single lecture I went to, helping out whomever the lecture was at in the lecture theater. And then over the course of sort of 6 months to a year, that number of IT staff started to drop. And then now I see lecturers coming in, operating the system by themselves. And I think the same principle applies with OER. OER is not something that you can wake up one morning and be like, ooh, I'm going to teach with OER today. It needs to be something that you're coached but also prepared to do. Because at the end of the day, you have the future of hundreds and thousands of students in your hands, and you need to be as careful and as meticulous as possible without being too constrained. So my suggestion is actually something that has been touched on by everybody that spoke before me. I think it's really important that you have a sense of coaching that happens alongside the implementation of OER, so that people aren't kind of thrown into the deep end, and it's not something that we're shocked by. And I'll give you a quick example. Like, watching some of the presentations before me, there are some things that I had no clue what they meant. And even though the explanation given was very good, I still I feel like I need more than 10 minutes to understand them. For example, CCBY, CCBYNC, CCBYNCND. If you ask anybody outside right now, you just go and say these letters to them, they'll think you're mad. You need to actually take the time to explain them in detail so that not only staff who implement these things in their courses, but also the students who are going to be the recipients of these also have a fair idea of what they mean. Because if OER is the way that we are going in the future, then I think us as students who will be in 10, 15 years creating this material need to have the groundwork so that we can help contribute to it. The second thing is, and I'll admit, I really had a glance at the OER policy, so I don't have anything in depth to base what I'm about to say on, but it's, from what I can see, it has an almost like a preferential way. So if you say that staff need to, their first point of call needs to be OER and then any other closed source, then it means that there is a sense of a hierarchy, and I think that is counterintuitive to trying to say that it should be non-binary. I think if you maybe make it as if you need to have both, and the idea needs to be including both as opposed to saying, pick this one first, then go to this one. Because that kind of is almost the connotation that is being, at least from my opinion, the connotation that I'm getting. And I think that if you have wording that isn't leaning towards a preferential way, then it means that you avoid the possibility of having that dichotomy between the two different forms. And the third thing that I would like to mention is, does making learning this really independent and largely online experience, does that remove human interaction? Or does that help to remove human interaction? I think that human interaction, particularly with the stuff that we talk about, the opinions, the beliefs, and the structures of our societies, I think it's really important that there is still that level of discussion that takes place. And so this is more so just like a worry rather than anything else. It's just, I think that sometimes if we become too lost in making everything online and accessible and you can access it from anywhere, does that also remove the possibility of students coming to lectures? Like, I know, for instance, now that lectures are online, there are far less students that go to lectures because they feel like that's an experience that will supplement what they can do if they go to a lecture. Whereas if you try and make it that it needs to be the idea of both in tandem. And so that's really the only suggestion that I have, is that it needs to be realized that open education is not going to take over what we currently have. It needs to be something that we do together and work together so that we can produce a result that is better. Because I think if you, and I know that no one's actually saying remove all textbooks, remove all traditional forms of education, but I'm saying that having that in the back of our minds is not going to do us any harm. And so the photo that I have here is a set of training wheels, and I think that the next sort of few years we need to treat them as when we're first learning to learn a bike. You have these training wheels on so that we ensure that everyone is being coached along the way. Because it's not a nice feeling to sit on a bike with only two wheels and someone just chugs you along, you know? Maybe someone should have mentioned that to my parents when I was learning to ride a bike. But having said that, really I have the most admiration for things like open educational resources for the three reasons that I've listed, because they allow for people like me, but also people like everybody else in this room to contribute to learning at a really, really large pace. The second thing is that they propel us to be able to, one, engage with lots of different resources, but at the same time allow us to form our own opinion rather than just take what's given to us as a given. And the third thing is, it's practical. You know, I have so little money in my bank account, I'm not going to complain if I don't have to pay for another textbook. So with that, thank you very much.